Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to all our listeners around the country, the world, and the galaxy. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and we are at episode 445, and we're so lucky to have Kyle Jones join us again today. Kyle is an adjunct professor at the Palo Alto University. In addition to so many other wonderful things that he does, he also has a private practice that we can tell you how to find him at the end of this podcast. We welcome you, Kyle.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Nice to be among friends this morning when we're recording.
Yeah, definitely. And today we're talking about how to give a dynamic interview when you're scared stiff, which is something that David has written about in his Feeling Good handbook, chapter 16.
Chapter number is it?
It's chapter 16.
Chapter 16.
Chapter 16. This is one of my favorite chapters in the Feeling Good handbook. I do, for graduating seniors at UCSB, I'm on the alumni council in the psych department, and we do mock interviews, to sort of help them prepare to be in an interview. And, we just have some kind of fake questions that we ask the students, just to give them some practice. And oftentimes I, get folks who are anxious or nervous or, they don't exactly approach it the way chapter 16 might recommend. And so I always recommend folks go read chapter 16 of the Feeling Good handbook. And so I figured, hey, why don't we, do a podcast on this topic? David's got some great, ideas and techniques and a wonderful approach to it. I figured we could talk about it more.
Cool.
Awesome.
And the folks that you're training for interviews are like PsyD students and PhD students looking for practicums and internships, that type of thing?
Yeah, sometimes those are definitely some of the folks I work with. Other times, even undergrads coming out of their undergraduate psychology degrees. So
okay,
broad range of folks.
So today you're going to hear the secret of giving a dynamic job interview and becoming everyone's number one choice, even when you're scared stiff and think that you don't have much to offer. And when you're up against really stiff competition, and it's not just for school, it's for jobs, it's for anything. I mean, life is a series of interviews. And if you know these secrets, you can get the other person on your team. Ron has a fabulous endorsement to read, and then we'll be off to the races and reveal the secret and demonstrate it and all kinds of good shit, as the Buddha has so often said.
Okay. Well, this was a letter written by someone that we featured on a previous podcast 288, and he talked to us about Team CBT for video game addiction, and that's Adam Holman. And he wrote to us regarding the personal work that Sunny Choi did on episode 443, and he wrote, "Hey there all. You've all inspired me greatly, and I'm certain I'll be illuminated again by the magic you've created together here with your generosity in time, teaching, and vulnerability. And special shout out to you, Sunny, for being open about something the world has a hard time talking about and certainly could use. I think there can be a tendency to focus exclusively on what's happening in politics to protect us from the vulnerability of what we're feeling about it. Often a lot of fear, sadness, frustration, anger, and grief. What a courageous thing to focus on your personal feelings and to allow for softness in a world that is becoming so tough and rigid. You're a model to all of us and a badass in my book. Be well, Adam."
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you, Adam. Adam is just a wonderful young man, and he's recently joined our team development app, Feeling Great team, and he's really a blessing. And one other thing I want to mention in line with that, what was our this what will be the number of Sonny's part 2?
444.
Yeah. So I want to tell you folks, if you liked that, and if you look at the show notes on 444, something we didn't talk about on the show because we didn't have it available at the time of the show, but Sonny's starting an awesome support group for people who are upset by the political situation right now. And a lot of people are really in misery. And it's not going to be a therapy group. It's just going to be a place to chat and get support. And it'll be limited to 12 people. And there's a sliding fee scale. It's very inexpensive. And so if you've been really feeling depressed and anxious and terrified and enraged and upset by all the political turmoil, that you might want to go to the show notes on my website. Just look up the list of podcasts. Hopefully those are being still being updated on my podcast, and go to 44 and read at the bottom of the show notes. You can click and see the flyer from Sonny on his support group.
Thanks.
Yeah,
David.
I saw that Sonny was doing that on an email list. I was excited. Sonny's excellent. I'm glad he's doing that.
Yeah, he's a beautiful man.
Well, I'm not feeling well, so I'm going to turn the podcast over to you two.
We'll miss you, and you heal up, and thank you for giving us this little slice of yourself to get us off to a good start, in spite of how awful you've been feeling the last few days due to a stomach bug.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rhonda. All right. So should we dive in?
Let's dive in. Yeah. I'm eager to shoot the breeze with you.
I know, it's been a while. I'm excited. Well, you've got 5 principles here in your chapter 16. Should we go through each of them, perhaps, and then maybe just talk about some techniques and approaches, or do you want to give a general overview first? What would be best?
Give a quick general overview. A lot of people struggle with performance anxiety and social anxiety and fear of public speaking and fear of being grilled on a job interview. And 99% of people go about interviews in the completely wrong way. And we're going to show you a diametrically opposite strategy that's way more fun and that is way more effective. And so if you want to become everyone's top choice for every interview you have and everything you apply for, stay tuned to this podcast, because it can be life-changing.
Yes, it really can. I've even in some therapy sessions last week, a person I was working with stumbled on this approach. It wasn't the topic we were focusing on, and I was praising them. Oh my gosh, you actually kind of did some things. You did some things right here. So let's dive in. So principle 1, when you're doing an interview here, be personable and friendly. Right? I guess maybe you could speak to that a little bit. I have some thoughts and ideas, and why it kind of seems on the nose. You do want to be personable and friendly, but I think in reality, you might be feeling a lot of pressure to impress the other person, right? To impress the interview, to come across as good. You might be nervous and tense, only want to kind of ramble about your qualifications, and maybe this slips away, being personable and friendly.
Right. Yeah, this is huge. And I could give so many examples of it, but I think I saw one in that book, I think by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it was he talked about when he was supposed to raise money for the Boy Scouts, which I guess have somewhat fallen into disrepute, but early in America they were kind of the big deal. And he managed to get an appointment with this very, very wealthy man. And the secretary or receptionist or whatever said, "Now, I want you to know that Mr. So-and-so is very rigid. He will start exactly at the time you're scheduled, and he will cut you off exactly after 15 minutes. So whatever you have to say, say it quick, and you won't get another chance." And so he says he went into this fellow's office right on time. And he saw this will interest you, Kyle, a fish mounted on the wall.
Ooh, a trophy fish mounted on the wall. I like fishing. It's one of my favorite ways to procrastinate.
That's right. And so he told the fellow, say, "Oh my goodness, I see this fish on the wall. What, where did you catch that one?" He said, "Oh, at the such and such a lake." And then Dale Carnegie said, I fish that lake myself a lot of times. Where was the location on the lake?" And he told him his special spot where he caught this fish, and they got really deep into talking about fishing.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden the 15 minutes was over, because when you're talking about something you're excited about, time just flies by. So then the secretary opened the door, so the interview's over. And so this fellow was ushering Dale Carnegie out of the office and said, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask you what the appointment was all about." And Dale Carnegie says, "Oh my goodness, I almost forgot. We were so engrossed in that cool talk about fishing. But I was just here to see if I could get a contribution for the Boy Scouts of America."
Yeah.
And the fellow said, "You'll have a check in the mail tomorrow for $1 million. And this was back when $1 million was probably like $20 million. Yeah, something really, really tremendous. But if that really speaks to principle number one, that people aren't so much responding to nervous people who try to impress them, but to people who are genuinely interested in them and can form a personal relationship. And the way you do that is not by trying to impress the other person with how great you are, but rather by showing a genuine interest in the other person. And we'll talk more about that as the principles go by.
Yeah. And I found that, that works when it happens to me, right? I imagine it happens to you when somebody asks you about your interest, what you like. If somebody were to ask me about fishing or kayaking, or now I'm into gardening or something, I just start, chatting away. And then I really like that person.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I have to confess that when I was in Philadelphia, I had, at the Presbyterian Medical Center, I had my clinical practice, and I had a number of therapists working with me. And the psychology PhD students from Penn, which was just the University of Penn 6 blocks away, always wanted to do rotations in my clinic because we had real patients who were paying, private practice patients. Yeah. And some of the other positions were like working with veterans at the VA or places where the patients weren't maybe very motivated and not as much fun to work with. So they always got, quite a few every year of those students would come by to see if we'd accept them for a practicum position in my clinic for 6 months or a year or however long it was. And my other colleagues on the staff used to screen them first, and then, maybe there would be 2 that they think were just totally outstanding, and then I'd have an interview with them.
Yeah.
And in my interviewing with them, I had only one criterion for whether or not I'd accept them.
Yes,
And
tell us.
the Penn has one of the top PhD programs for clinical psychology in the United States, and so
Yes.
everyone has a real high IQ and fantastic scores, and they would come in and try to impress me, and I'd kind of be wanting to limit the time and feeling bored and say, do I have to keep talking to this person? And they would talk about themselves, and how great they were and what their research is and, what their career interests are. And I didn't give a damn about any of them, to be honest with you. And then every now and then one would come in and say, I'm so glad I got this interview with you because I read your book, Feeling Good. And it really changed my life and career. Or my mother read your book and she was horribly depressed and helped her so much. And then I said, this is the person I'm going to hire, or accept for position in the clinic. And that was the only criterion I ever used. And I always used it.
Yeah. If somebody,
when they said they like me or my work, I said, this person's got to be an effing genius and a wonderful human being.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how it worked out between us. I remember just sending you a cold email out of the blue, when I started my PhD program, at Palo Alto, and the place I worked at before had given every patient, a copy of the Feeling Good Handbook, right?
Yeah,
and it was called Recovery Road Medical Center. Sharif El-Asudi, a great psychiatrist and still friend of mine, ran it. I don't know if it's still up and going, but, and so we knew about your work. And here I was in Palo Alto. And I remember emailing you about your Tuesday group, and you just said, sure, come on down,
Yeah.
And I think this principle about being personable and friendly and trying to get the other the person to, trying to get to know them a little bit applies even in high tech jobs, right? Like I was mentioning to you that Reddit post that we saw, where somebody's trying to get a, highly technical job at Facebook, right? And he's posting on Reddit saying, I know a lot of people are trying to get these highly coveted positions, and here's what worked for me. And at the end, the guy says, the main thing that carried me was communication. The biggest feedback I got from my interviewers was that they really liked chatting with me, So he goes, and these high tech interviews, right? You might be, doing multiple rounds of interviews where you're having to demonstrate your technical skills. And, sure, there's a certain flow to it where you've got to, demonstrate that you can actually do the job. But there are moments throughout any interview process where you can take the time to connect with the other person, right? And that might be what tips the scales in your favor. Because think about it. If someone gets an interview at a high-tech company, everybody should, at a baseline, be able to demonstrate the skills, right? You'd hope. And so what's gonna sort of jostle you above the other candidates? And it could just be this.
Yeah. Now I don't know what all the 5 principles are because it's been a while since I wrote that.
Don't worry, I know them.
Yeah.
This one is good. This is the kind of the main one, I think, that kind of is mind-blowing. Make them sell themselves to you. Tell us what that means. Good doctor.
Okay, that's number 2, right?
That's principle 2. Make them sell themselves to you.
Yeah, that seems, I thought I'm supposed to sell myself to this person who's interviewing me.
Yeah. And instead you kind of
maybe have about that one.
You have to, true to other elements of your team CBT, you have to take a slightly paradoxical approach, right? I think this, you're not necessarily in a relationship, but in the moment when you're being interviewed, there's an interpersonal dynamic that's going on, right? And if you are, trying to show off and sell yourself to the interviewer, right? You may not come off as confident, or you might not come off as that you know your value and your worth, right? And you want to be kind of a hot commodity, right? You want to be a little bit elusive, So in principle too, you want to actually be asking questions of the interviewer, of the company, right? You want to be evaluating them. Because think about it. If you take a step back, right? Do you want to just kind of peddle yourself and try and sell yourself to get a job, and then the job might not be a good fit, and then you feel trapped and stuck and anxious, right? You actually want to be kind of a critical consumer when you're trying to find a job or a placement or whatever it might be, because you don't want to end up stuck in a position you hate. Right. So there's good reason to evaluate, the company, who you work with, the other people. And by virtue of trying to do that, you actually kind of make them sell themselves to you, right? You don't want to go in there going like, oh, I desperately need this job, right? It's going to make them reject you.
Yeah, right. So let's demonstrate how that works, and we can do a role play with a role reversal.
Sure.
But why don't you be the candidate?
Sure.
And let's say you're interviewing for a job. Should we do it like that with my
with your clinic or something?
Yeah, with my clinic. Yes. And so, Kyle, I'm pleased to meet you, and my time is very limited for our interview, and as you know, we have this one position open for a therapist in our clinic, and I have 200 applicants for it, and 3 of them have won the Nobel Prize in psychology. And others, graduated first in their class at Harvard. And so can you just tell me what makes you so special? Why should we want to hire you?
Wow, David, I'm just so blown away by the, creme de la creme that you attract here at your clinic. And yes, it's a highly coveted position for sure. I know you've got all these top candidates, but I'd love to know actually more about the role itself. What kind of candidate are you looking for? What kind of therapist are you wanting to, take this position, this role?
Yeah, I love that. And you can even add to it, say what kind of candidates have worked out great and turned into beautiful team members and beautiful therapists, and which ones have kind of soured and not fit in well. And then I can see, whether or not I think I might have what you're looking for, or perhaps not.
Yeah.
But I would also say that I'm not surprised that you have 200 applicants, because I read your recent article in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology, some of your new treatment strategies here at the clinic, and I can tell you it was awesome, and that's why I applied, and I'm so excited to hear you and hear more about your research. And one thing I'd like to know is, if I were to come here, would I have a chance to participate in that kind of research?
Wow. There you go, David. Excellent work. A plus, taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do? Tell the listeners what you kind of did. Break it down for them so they can.
Yeah. Well, I did several things that I think are key in job interviews. First, I'm not trying to impress the interviewer. I'm trying to get them to sell themselves to me, exactly what you said. And when he says we've got 200 job applicants, I turn that into a chance to compliment them. I'm not surprised, because of your pioneering work that I've been following for several years as a student, and now meeting you, that's like a dream come true. And I'd love to know, are you still doing that kind of research? And if I were to come here, would I have a chance to do that kind of research as well? So here, do you see, I'm asking him to sell himself, or her to sell themselves to me. But I've also done some research ahead of time. So I know about the person, so I can make conversation that will interest them. you can look them up on the internet and see what kind of person they are, and what kind of work that they've done, and find something to express an interest instead of impressing themselves with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is like how to get them eating out of your hand.
Then when I went to my internship, my pre-doctoral internship at the Sierra Nevada VA in Reno, I was excited to go there because I saw that one of the faculty on the program, in their training program, had mentioned some team CBT, right? And so I took the time to look them up ahead of time, and that was really drew me to that particular program. And I think it illustrates the point you're making very well, right? You want to look up the person so you can know what they're into or what their interests are, or what they're doing, and then be able to comment on that and talk about that, and ask them, if that's something that's relevant to the position. And right, that's a combination of principles 1 and 2. You're personable and friendly, and you're, trying to make them sell themselves to you.
Awesome. Okay, what's number 3?
Well, number 3, be honest, but present yourself in a positive light. So, I think this relates to the fact that, you might have some shortcomings, right? You might actually, there might be something that makes you a less desirable candidate. And, it might come up during the interview, and you want to be able to acknowledge that, but not necessarily fall too far into it. You want to present yourself in a positive way.
Yeah, and this came in, that occurred to me. I was treating a fellow who had started some kind of startup or corporation that went bankrupt. Mm-hmm. He was a CEO, I think, of a smallish firm, but he had to go out now interviewing for a new job. And he was terrified that someone would say, "Why should we hire you? Didn't you just drive your previous company into bankruptcy? And would you be planning to do the same for us?" Or something like that, and so I trained him to say, well, yes, I might not be the kind of CEO you're looking for, because I have made a lot of mistakes along the road, and this one was a particularly painful mistake. But I've also learned a tremendous amount, not only from what I've done right, but from what I've done wrong. And I might just be the kind of CEO you want to see the red flags ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You sort of acknowledge the reality of the situation. You use some disarming, and you put yourself, you show some growth in that example, right? Here's what I learned. Here's what I learned. Here's how that could be valuable. Yeah. I mean, I even think that comes up. Let's say you've taken, let's say you've been out of work for, a year or two or something for one reason or another. And, there's a big gap on your resume, right? And then somebody asks you, "Hey, what's this gap on your resume? How come you haven't been working, for a year? What's been going on?" Right? And I think in many cases, it could actually be the truth that you were struggling with a really severe mental health problem or a physical health problem, or something, happened, and maybe you procrastinated reapplying for jobs. You kind of got on the downward spiral, right? And I think, there's room for a little honesty, right? To be honest, I was struggling with a personal health problem, and I spent some time, focusing on my recovery. And no, I wasn't in the workforce, but at the same time, I did my best to stay on top of the trends and took some trainings, and, it really gave me some perspective about, what can happen and the value of work. And I'm happy to try and get back into the workforce and make a contribution.
Yeah. If you looked at my resume or CV or whatever we call it, you'll find 2 breaks of a full year around the time of my medical school.
Yeah.
And why don't you be an interviewer and challenge me on that?
David, we're here, at Stanford Medical School, and I know you're looking for a position here, but I'm seeing these breaks in your CV where you weren't practicing medicine or doing anything. What the heck was going on? Why should we hire somebody who doesn't have consistent work?
Well, you might not want me. You can find a lot of people who never dropped out of medical school, but I dropped out of medical school for a full year on 2 different occasions, and there were a couple of reasons, but the main one was I hated Stanford Medical School and the model of psychiatry I saw here, and it looked uptight and rigid, and I said, do I want to spend my life like that? And I am so glad I did this. This was, Palo Alto in the late 1960s, and people were dropping acid and turning on. And I lived on the street and got a motorcycle and learned about life. I was just an uptight nerd and still am to some extent, but I sure learned about life. And in my career as a psychiatrist, I can tell you that what I learned on the streets of Palo Alto has been far more helpful to my patients than anything I ever learned at the medical school. But eventually I decided to go back and do my internship and residency and take the straight and narrow and publish papers and achieve a certain degree of fame with popular books and scientific articles. But I'll always be proud of and cherish those 2 magical years. I was even homeless for a period of time, and that's another dimension I can bring to my work with people who are depressed and struggling because they have very little.
Wow. Seems like you bring a lot to the table here. You're hired.
Thank you. All right.
Well, we kind of are bleeding into principle number 4 here with, some of our demonstrations here, right? Principle 3, be honest, but kind of present yourself in a positive light. But principle 4 is, don't get defensive about your shortcomings. This is sort of maybe 2 sides of the same coin, right? Don't get defensive about your shortcomings.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't I'll be David, and you can attack me on my shortcomings, which are multiple and frequently commented on, not only by my fans, but by the many who hate me.
Oh, David, this is an awkward position for me. What shortcomings? I don't know. I'll make some up.
Well, I'm kind of narcissistic and arrogant and,
dogmatic about your approach. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We can work with that. All right, David, you kind of have a reputation here of being kind of full of yourself, narcissistic, some would even say. And, you really are dogmatic about your approach and your thinking on therapy here. Maybe you're kind of inflexible. You've got a rep for that, right? Why would we want to hire someone like that?
Yeah, you might not want to hire me because I have been narcissistic both in my therapy and in my research. And it's been both a driving force that's helped me to grow and learn and do some kick-ass research and develop some wonderful therapy techniques. But it's also been a thorn in the flesh, especially in therapy and teaching. And one of the things I've had to learn is to say you're right when people criticize me. And to learn to listen to what they have to say and to support what they have to say. I can remember I was still a resident and I was giving a talk at Baylor University on the serotonin theory of depression. And I had just won this A.E. Bennett Award. And so I was really, and I had done that on brain serotonin metabolism. So I had some pretty advanced looking stuff, and there were about 1,000 people in the audience. And so I was going through the whole serotonin thing and all of that. And halfway through, someone in the back stood up and started screaming at me. And he said, "I'm so sick of hearing this bullshit establishment stuff about a chemical imbalance in the brain and people who control all the power and give out all the grants, and it's just like a kind of a corruption system."
Sure.
And people like me, I've found the true cause of depression in my laboratory, and everyone's ignoring me. And that type of thing. And
sure.
He was shouting loudly, and it caused a huge embarrassment throughout the room. And then I used the disarming technique and stroking, and I said to him, I can see how powerfully and strongly you feel, you believe in what you're saying, and to be totally honest with you, we're on the same page. I agree with you. I think the chemical imbalance theory is just a lot of horseshit. It's supported by money from drug companies, and all you have to do to make a big career for yourself is to, support this theory and do research on it. But my research, too, has shown that it's not the cause of depression. And I feel like people like you need more attention and recognition and respect. And if you'd come up at the end of the talk and tell me more about your work, I'd be absolutely thrilled to learn from you. And he seemed as pleased as can be, and he sat right down.
I bet he just, his anger melted away.
Yeah, and then at the end of the talk, about 20 or 30 psychiatrists rushed up to the podium to ask questions, and he was at the back of the group, and he just pushed himself rudely through to get right up to the front. And then he looked at me and says, "Dr. Burns, your talk was the best damn talk I've ever heard in psychiatry. Could I have a copy of your slides to show to my students?" And I said, "You sure can." But that's don't get defensive.
Don't get defensive, right? I mean, and it can be really hard because, when somebody pricks you and pokes at you and, points out something that's a shortcoming, the natural inclination can be to, feel that rush of anger and,
that's not right. I resent what you're saying. I hope you got the humor.
I think they did. I think it came through. I remember one time we were on a hike practicing disarming, and you were making the point you can disarm about anything. And, it was kind of a cloudy day, and it was raining on and off. And you told me, "Kyle, just we'll role play, and you tell me it's not raining." And it was like very clearly raining, and then I said, "David, what do you mean it's raining? It's not raining." And you said, "Oh, you're right. It's where you come from, this is nothing at all compared to rain. This is just some sputtering from the sky. This isn't really the rain, that you would experience at all. There's no real rain coming here. This is just some mist or something," and you kind of made this point that like, you don't even, you can always try and find something to disarm.
Yeah. And, and you could say, and one of the reasons I'm not noticing the rain either is because it's so much fun talking to you.
Yes, exactly.
Like being in heaven, not like being in a rainstorm.
Oh, gosh. So, yes, don't get defensive about your shortcomings. And like this might even, maybe they criticize a specific skill or something, Hey, you don't, we need someone who does DBT therapy here. You don't have any experience doing DBT, right?
Okay, let's hear how you'd answer that one. We're specializing in DBT, also known as eye jiggling therapy. And you don't seem to have any training in eye jiggling therapy or ear tugging therapy, which we're super big on. We take depressed patients and teach them to tug on their ears for 30 seconds a day, and it's miraculous.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't have any experience at all at either eye jiggling therapy or ear tugging therapy. But what I love about what your clinic here is offering is it's offering some skills-based treatments. And I do have some experience offering, some therapy that's focused on skills. And I don't want to be, too married to one school of therapy or the other. I'd love to learn about, the eye jiggling and the ear tugging therapy that you offer. I even hear you do some face tapping therapy too, which is an exciting, thing that I'd love to learn more about. And, if I can do some skills-based therapy in other settings, I'm confident with some great tutelage from experts like you, I could really benefit from learning from you.
Yeah. How was that?
I thought it was okay.
Yeah, very good.
What did you think?
Yeah, beautiful. And you could even say, tell me when you got turned on to these therapies, and tell me how it's affected your life and clinical practice. You seem very excited. You seem to be a man of passion, or a woman of passion, or a person of passion. And set me on fire, to turn me on to what you've been doing and how it works.
Yes, exactly. A+. Okay.
Yeah. And so what is number 5?
Principle 5. When you don't know what to say, paraphrase the question or punt.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you might get anxious, or you might get rattled. Your mind might go blank. You might not be able to think of anything to say. The inclination might be to panic. Right?
Yeah.
And then you can you might freeze up or something, and maybe you as you're preparing for interviews, you might know this about yourself. And so you might want to rely on principle 5. When you don't know what to say, paraphrase or punt, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Let's demonstrate that one. Do you want to demonstrate it, or do you want me to demonstrate it?
I'll demonstrate. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. We're looking for, you seem to have good credentials, doctor, but we're looking for someone who's really sophisticated in, inverse structural equation modeling with nonlinear systems. Can you tell us why that's a tremendously important technique?
Gosh, okay. So, I appreciate you thinking I have good credentials. And so it sounds like you're looking for someone who, has experience in the really sophisticated technique of, inverse structural equation modelings. Am I getting that right? Is that what that's what you're looking for? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, pause. That might be what I would do, right? You just paraphrase the question, buy yourself some time. David, I don't have any knowledge about that, but that would be
turn it the other direction. Do a role reversal.
David, we appreciate your credentials here, but we're really looking for someone who's got some sophistication in statistical analysis, who can do some inverse structural equation modeling, for different nonlinear approaches. Is that something you confidently can do?
No, but it's something I'd be amazed to learn about. And I've heard it's really the key to research, to develop mathematical models to move the field forward. And you've been a fantastic pioneer in that area. And tell me what your experience has been. And also, if I might have a chance, if I were to come to the clinic, to work in your lab and learn about these approaches, because you've been talking about it a long time in your lectures, and how excited you are. Tell me a little bit more about it. This is very exciting to me.
So tell the listeners what you just do. I kind of gave a basic paraphrase the question back, but David gave an expert what we would call a punt. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, it just means to you don't try to fake it, but express enthusiasm. It's the same as number 1. Be personable. Just say, "Wow, I've never had that kind of training, but I would love to learn that." And because the work you've been doing is legendary, And I'm excited just to be talking to you, and I'd love to learn more about how you've evolved your niche here in psychology and psychological research, because it sounds to me like the thing for the future has arrived. And
Yeah.
I'd love to, you're blowing my mind. Tell me more about how you use that inverse
structural equation modeling. Right. You sort of put it back on the interviewer. I think, like if let's say somebody kind of asks you about your strengths and weaknesses and you kind of freeze up, you might, paraphrase the question, buy yourself a second, right? Oh, so you're wanting to know about my strengths and weaknesses. Let me see. I'm a flawed human being. Hopefully my weaknesses won't show through too much, but I do have some strengths, something like that, right? You just want to buy yourself some time, or the punt, like you demonstrated, give your interviewer kind of a chance to respond back as you take interest in them. I think that could also be like, like if it comes to salary negotiations or a start date or something, a punt could be kicking the can down the road, so to speak, right?
Let me think about that. And,
let me think about that and get back to you, right? Like, can you start next week? It's like, well, let me get back to you about the start date. I'm really excited that you're offering me a position here. I'm so flattered. I love it. But, I don't want to double book myself and then have to backpedal. Let me get back to you about the start date, or something.
And let me maybe wrap this up, that brings some of these principles together was, and I asked Rhonda, I thought I'd told this story on the podcast previously, but she doesn't think I have. So if you've heard the story, deepest apologies ahead of time. But what really cemented this for me was my interview for the Stanford Medical School, because I only applied to medical schools because one of my supervisors at Amherst thought that was a better choice than clinical psychology for a variety of reasons, and that I didn't understand. But I told him I didn't think it was a good idea because I wasn't a pre-medical student.
Sure.
And I'd never had a biology course or anything. and then I knew if I took the MCATs or whatever it is, like I probably have the lowest score in the country. But I did somehow manage to get an interview at Stanford. And so I went, and it was in the basement of the museum on the Stanford campus. They have a Rodin garden and a museum, and down in the basement is the anatomy department. And I went down there and met this fellow, and I had apparently they'd scheduled a 15-minute interview with him. And I was terrified that he was going to ask me, medical questions, technical
that
questions.
You didn't know the answers to.
Yeah, or about my research as an undergraduate philosophy major. and so I said, "Wow, it's a little dark down here and kind of creepy. Is what's it like working down here? Is this where they dissect all the cadavers?" The medical students? And he says, "Yeah, but it's actually pretty cool down here. In fact, my laboratory is just down the hall." And I said, "Well, could I take a look? I'd love to see, what kind of research you do in your laboratory." And he got real excited, and he showed me, brought me into the laboratory, and there were all these machines and stuff, spectroscope, whatever, X, Y, or Z. I didn't know what they were, but I could read the name of one of them on the front. So I said, "Oh, I see you've got one of these instant mass spectrophotometers," or whatever it was. I had no idea. I said, do you use this, and how does it fit in with the research you're now doing? Yeah. And he got all excited, and he started talking all about his research. And I think he was just real lonely. And so I just kept asking him about himself and expressing interest in what he was saying, even though I didn't understand hardly anything he was saying. and we just jabbered on there for some time. And then he looked at his watch and he says, "Oh, my goodness, we've been talking for 2 hours. And you were only scheduled for 15 minutes, and I've got an important meeting at the Quad at the medical school right now. Here, you can walk with me over in that direction. We can keep talking." And as we were going out of the basement of this museum where the anatomy department was, we were going up some steps to get up to the lawn level. And he says, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask you who you are. What's your name?" And I said, "Oh, my name is David Burns. I'm from Amherst College." And then he says, "Well, I want you to know, David Burns, that you're the kind of young man we need at Stanford Medical School." and I said, "I'm really flattered that you would say that, because it's been so much fun talking to you, but I'm afraid there's no way I could go to the Stanford Medical School." And this is, again, make them chase you, right?
Sure, yeah.
And he says, "What are you talking about? You think Harvard's going to make you a better offer? No way. We'll outbid them no matter what they offer you." And I said, no, it's not like that. But see, the problem is my dad is a Lutheran minister, and we don't have any money, and he believes that borrowing money is a sin.
Sure.
And I've heard it can cost as much as $100,000 to go to the Stanford Medical School. So, I'm afraid that wouldn't be possible for me.
Yeah.
And he says, that's nonsense. I'm the chairman of the admissions committee. And that's where I'm going right now, to a meeting of the admissions committee. And I'm going to tell them that you're our number one choice for this coming class, and that all of your expenses will be paid throughout. You'll have no tuition. We'll pay for your room and board and everything. But you must come to the Stanford Medical School. And I said, "Well, I'm so grateful. That's an offer I can't refuse."
There you go.
And that's how I got into the Stanford Medical School.
Wow, what a great story.
Yeah.
I mean, it just illustrates so many of the points we're talking about. No wonder you put them in your book, right? You were personable and friendly. You took an interest in the guy, right? You did make him sell yourself to you. You were honest and put yourself in a positive light. You didn't get defensive,
Yeah. And it's a human thing. The world runs on human connections, and certainly qualifications are important. But I didn't have any of the qualifications for medical school. And, I didn't even know what a thorax was, or an abdomen, or what was inside of them. Honest to God.
Yeah.
They were using terms like that. And I said, "What's in the thorax?"
You got to look that up.
and, that's where the lungs and the heart are. I thought, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, the thing, it's a lot to do with overcoming social anxiety too. People who are listening, who are shy and awkward in social situations. It's not about impressing people with how great you are, which is just something that none of us can do. It's just too pressurizing. It's more about impressing the other person with how great they are, and showing humility and admiration and confidence because of the human component.
Yeah, and trying to make a connection with the other human being across from you.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I like to work with people who take an interest in me and who I feel good about and are connected with, and then I take an interest in them, and makes for a good working relationship.
Yeah.
People can learn this. People can learn the skills, right? Just like you learned about the thorax and the abdomen and I guess the heart and lungs that are in there or something,
Yeah, right. Right. But that's about it. It's been such a joy talking to you today, and I could have many more stories, but we've probably given enough stories.
I know. Look at this. The time has flown by. We've been at this for almost an hour. I can't believe it.
Well, you probably have another commitment coming up, and I probably have something scheduled also.
I do. We've got to wrap up. Let's get Rhonda back here to wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can get you back on some other podcasts, some Ask Davids and stuff, because it's just, I love you and respect you so incredibly much.
Oh.
And by the way, Kyle is one of the finest young therapists I've ever had the joy of training. And so we'll put his contact info at the bottom of the show notes. But maybe you could just tell them right now, if anyone, what's your specialty, and if anyone wants to contact you, where do you have a website, or how would they do that?
Oh, sure. Thanks, David. I'm flattered, and I'd love to join you again. I love spending time with you here on the podcast. I am in virtual clinical practice throughout California doing video sessions. I live in Anaheim, California now. I'll probably get some office space and hang a shingle at some point. But for now, just doing things over video. The best way to get in touch with me is via my email, info@kylejonesphd.com. And I work with folks with a variety of problems, right? Mood problems, habits and addictions, relationship problems, things like that. I have taken a particular interest and specialty working with folks with obsessive compulsive disorders. I love to do, exposures. I set the agenda. Don't worry, David, and address resistance and try and see if there's a hidden emotion, of course. But it's fun to do exposure because people get better sometimes. So it's good. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I met a wonderful young woman recently in a professional context, and she was raving about. She was so excited about Team CBT, and I said, "Well, how did you find out about it?" And she said, "Oh, I had this kick-ass therapist who worked with me, Kyle Jones."
Thank you. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I think we'll call this episode Kick-Ass Interviewing Strategies.
Yeah, that sounds good. Rhonda didn't pick up. Maybe she's on the toilet. Oh, I heard a funny joke I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
They made a huge discovery about diarrhea. Did you know this?
Okay.
It's a huge discovery they made. They found out that it's genetic, that diarrhea is a genetic condition. Do you know that? Because it runs in your genes.
How lucky I came back just for that joke.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.